connections with the French, our connections with the Portuguese, our connections with the British, in such a manner that it works for our people. It gives us the ECOWAS of peoples that we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think given the complexity of the question, I will, in 1 minute, switch to French, and also because I'm not in great shape. But I want to thank Amandla Institute, African Leadership Center, Governor Kayode Fayemi and Mrs. B.C. Adeleye Fayemi, and for having WATHI as a partner of these events. It's a great privilege, it's a great pleasure to be here. And I arrived only yesterday, and so it is an opportunity again to say how happy we are to contribute to this discussion. So yeah, we switch to French, maybe to respond to the question.
The first thing I would like to say relating to colonial heritage that we have is that what are we doing today and what should we do in the next 50 years? In my view, we need to acknowledge the fact that this past really existed and that we can't do anything about that. And we cannot continue to spend a good part of our time complaining about what transpired historically and the trajectory of our societies for decades or even for centuries were disturbed by colonial experiences. On a continent that is really young, in West Africa that is particularly young, we should work on all the issues by projecting ourselves into the future, and I think having the new generation in mind, having recognized our colonial heritage, we should also shed such heritage and look at the world the way it is today. The main point that I want to make is that when we look at the world the way it is today, it will be brutal. We have what happens with regards to power play, and sometimes it's quite brutal, and the return of multilateralism. Sometimes we say that multilateral institutions were made on the basis of those that won the Second World War, especially the Western world, to be simple. In the multilateral system, there are a few rules that make the weakest to exist and to be protected by common and universal rules. If we are under multilateral system, we are in power play between the countries. African countries are one of the weakest in terms of military and economic powers, and that will not be changed in one decade or two, which means that we in West Africa should make sure we preserve multilateralism and be able to create a capacity within our institutions to be able to understand the world. What I'm asking myself is that within ECOWAS, do we have people who are following what China is doing, US, Turkey, and Japan, and the EU is doing on a daily basis, even Vietnam? Because in the next 10 years, we are going to complain about new actors who are omnipresent, and because when they will have been economically development, they want to do some projection. They will come and look for markets. They will come and look for natural resources. And of course, they are already working on what will happen in Africa. We in West Africa should have the same strategic thinking. ECOWAS, in my view, should be the organization that will have that internal capacity in terms of policy towards China and the world powers. And in North Africa, for instance, if ECOWAS does not understand North Africa, how are we going to solve the problems in the Sahelian part of the continent if we don't take that into account? Well, in order for me to be short, I think we need a strategic capacity, and we also need to be pragmatic in the way of developing that capacity. If we don't have that capacity, we should be more creative. We should have a network of that we can piggyback to on the issue of strategy. Strategy, so that we can work on future decisions based on that strategy. Thank you.
Dr. Yabi, for that. I hear you say that we need to acknowledge our past, but also we need to understand our current realities and be able to position ourselves that way to take advantage of what is out there. But to you, Prof, Dr. Yabi is saying that we should be strategic. We should have what probably we call strategic ambiguity, or be non-aligned, so that we can work with all. What is your thought on that?
Well, thank you very much. He did also say something I want to start from, and one of the things he said, that we can acknowledge it, but there's nothing we can do about it. And that's why I want to disagree with him, that we can do something about it. Yes, the starting point is to acknowledge it. You talked about understanding our current realities. I'm saying we also need to understand colonialism fully, because we do not understand colonialism and its lingering impacts, right? So we need to really fully understand it, its geography, its politics, and its ideation, and how we continue to be colonized even till date. Once we have that understanding, that mental decolonization, like people like Chinwenzu talk about, then it can be the beginning of rejuvenation. And for me, the answer to the question is turning the lemons of colonialism into lemonades, right? So that we can really begin to talk about seeing these constraints as strategic constraints and then leverage points. So we can map them. My short answer will be that we'll map them. And once we're able to map them, we can neutralize their harm, their effects. Debt traps, for instance, the extractive contracts that continue to persist, our security dependence on past colonial, destroyers. Because another thing we need to change is the way we think about them. We like to say colonial masters, and that keeps us in mental servitude. So they are colonial thieves, and we should call them so. So when we understand that strategically, we'll now begin to look at all the contracts that continue to keep us bound, and then convert the competitive interests of external powers in the continent. You will recall that there is some kind of rivalry between different powers, and I'm glad that when you ask the question of who should we be doing business with going forward, the answer was everyone. Right, but there are superpowers that are competing, in the continent right now. So it's like the Cold War era, which we did nothing about, we didn't take advantage of. But now we can actually become aware and take advantage of that competition, and use it into a bargaining power for regional development, for capacity building and policy autonomy. And if I can suggest one or two practical ways, just because of time, like I talked about before, the systemic mapping of these colonial legacies is important. We can commission a rapid regional audit that identifies our debt exposures, the security arrangements, like I said. But one of the things I think we can also do is to revise our basic and tertiary education curricula. I think that's very important to do. I've already mentioned the need to turn competition into leverage, use the current great power rivalry to negotiate better terms in terms of local content, transfer of tech, concessional finance guarantees for our sovereignty. Those kinds of things are things that we can do. And even in terms of security, autonomy, and transparency, we need to formalize transparency protocols for all security partnerships that we have. And in the process also, we in our own regional capacities while doing that. So we'll talk about our standby forces and then the fusion of intelligence centers. Intelligence sharing. And the last point I probably want to mention is
African integration. So this region you are talking about, and this is what I will do. We need to rebuild this train, which brings along 15 member states, and we have a trade of African trade that is losing ground. Secondly, I will give back power to the traders, to entrepreneurs. And he talked about big empires, the empire of Mali, Songhai, some states along the Guinea Gulf, and also in Nigeria, from Benin to Togo. Are we not always overstating what big empires and African kingdoms that were created in order to safeguard these trade corridors? We don't overemphasize that. It is at this point that we created big enterprises. If we look ahead in the 21st century, we must consider that modern states have this duty of creating a favorable condition for trade and allow them to thrive. So a dynamic intra-African trade where we do not need to bring someone from outside to show us the way. I want to reiterate intra-African trade by highlighting the keys of the economy to traders, to entrepreneurs, as we have in Aliko Dangote in this country. In Senegal, we have with Lesso. In Cote d'Ivoire, we have Beyond and others. We need to give the key to entrepreneurs, traders, and industrial experts, and the state will be in charge of protecting their roads. At this point, we don't need to look for experts elsewhere. Secondly, we need to look towards the south. Talking about Africa and EU cooperation, Daniel Bash talked about partnership with prosperity, that he clearly states that the alliance of France with Africa did not yield any interesting fruit for Africa. So we need to look elsewhere. Looking elsewhere, what does that mean? We need to look at the global south. The alliance on Asia, which was born from this condition, Mercosur described that to break the hegemony, he needs to align with the south. Africa can do the same, even ECOWAS. We can go further towards the south, the Asia, and the global south. From that point, Sheila Bachodian, a Senegalese philosopher, talked about Bandung epistemique. That is in the 50s. They had to bring some discussions in the southern countries, and this issue has been brought up once more. So Bandung at the time emphasized more trade among southern countries colonized by Europe. So Bandung has decided that we need well-dense cooperation between Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. So we have to come back to the Bandung spirit of the 50s while emphasizing the economy this time around, while ensuring that trade can be done between Africa, ECOWAS, South Africa, and Latin America. I think the president of ECOWAS, I would have loved him to be here with us leading our commission. I will not retrieve what I said. Take note of this. What I will implement if I'm the president of ECOWAS, I will do that if I'm given that position in the future. Thank you.
Very, very much, Mr. President. No, in your discussion, you mentioned that if you were the president of ECOWAS, you would emphasize intra-African trade. You would want us to look inward first for solutions to our challenges. Should be driven by that kind of principle. The question is, in the global world right now, are we able to operate like that without the intervention of our partners out there? It is one of the key questions we need to answer as we are having this discussion. But then, Dr. Yobi, my question then to you is, we have engaged in countries to being partners. Have we really been partners? Have we been partners with equal voice at the table? And if your answer to that is no, why has this been so? But if your answer to that is yes, why hasn't it worked for us? And so I'm going to pose the same question that I posed to, Dr. Cisse to you. If you had the opportunity to be the ECOWAS president, what are the key principles, in addition to what he has mentioned, that will drive your engagement with global partners, looking at what we have done over the past 50 years and looking at how something should change or what should change in terms of our approach when it comes to partnerships? What are some of those key principles that would guide your engagement with partners if you were the ECOWAS president? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will start in English, maybe to try and respond to the second question, and then probably I will go back to French for more clarity on a few things. I think if I were the president of a commission, I would certainly don't consider that I should be the one deciding, based on what I feel, what should be the principle that should guide partnership. I think that would be, if I do that, that would be an illustration of the problems that we have in terms of how we make decisions. I think that we should be having a whole conversation not only on what ECOWAS should do, but how ECOWAS should be restructured to be in a better position to do things more efficiently, which is a different question. So the question of principle, it should be based on an internal strategic capacity where we think about all the different blocks, all the different powers, the emerging powers, what are their interests, what are our interests, what are the areas of convergence, what are the areas of divergence. We have natural resources. Do we believe really that the countries that have an advantage in having access to resources at a low cost, do we believe that they will just facilitate our work in keeping our natural resources and making the transformation at home? That will create more jobs for our youth. But do we think that the US and the others, they will just stay and then they will, let it happen? No, because, and for me, it's not a question of colonialism. That I think that the fixation on colonialism distracts us from the reality of countries defending what they consider as being their strategic interest. Be they the former colonial powers or not, it doesn't matter. What matters now is what the reality of the world we are living in. I don't think that the Chinese or the Russians or the Vietnamese or the Turks, their primary interest is to make sure that they defend the security of their country and the people, and including the economic security as well. So when we think about the terms of the partnership with all those powers, I think we need to keep in mind the very interest of the West African people, but at the same time being extremely realistic about the reality of the rapport de force. Because if we don't understand the balance of power, then we'll just keep having very nice, heroic people who get killed, who get neutralized. I don't think that that will advance the continent to have more and more kind of heroic, sovereign guys who just say they want to liberate the continent. At the very end, they actually increase the vulnerability of the continent by weakening our institutions. I think we should be investing on our institution of knowledge, and I fully agree with what was said by the brother from South Africa. We should be basing our decision-making process in institutions like ECOWAS based on knowledge, based on collective thinking, based on flexible network of researchers that will be providing analysis to make those who make decisions. And we should not be going to meeting with China or Russia or Japan without having a clear clarity about what we want. And we should also discuss the fact that on all strategic issues we cannot ask for funding from external partners. It doesn't make sense to say that we want to be independent and we are not able to fund even strategic documents without external funding. It's just not consistent to do that. So that is maybe what I can add for now.
Thanks very much, Dr. Yabi, for that. And my next question, to Ms. Nyoni, based on what he has said and what has been reflected around, the table, my question is, how do we ensure that the voice of the market woman in Lomé, or in Accra, or in Abidjan is heard when our heads of state are negotiating deals on our behalf at the international level? How do we ensure, what are some of the practical ways that we can ensure that the voice of that market woman is heard in that room in Paris, in that room in Switzerland, in that space in Geneva? Yes.
Thank you. I mean, I think to begin with, the process of, it goes back again to the issue of agenda setting and priority setting, because I imagine that those who are in the rooms in Paris, in Brussels, in New York, are not simply the deals, the negotiations that they're putting on the table have not come from this room to begin with, or the ECOWAS Parliament, or the Pan-African Parliament. The people in those rooms represent, or I would hope, represent a constituency. And those constituencies, we would also hope, have framed, have communicated their needs. Or those people are also coming from constituencies and from communities where the needs are lived out on a daily basis. I think I heard in the previous session and other sessions over these 2 days about the gap and the growing gap between those of us who sit in these rooms and those who are, if you want to call them at the grassroots level, ordinary people, the ordinary market women, as you have said. The growing gap between their needs, their realities, and those who wield power and can continue to use that power and express it to further whatever they believe is correct. I think we have numerous examples across the continent of situations where ordinary people are forced to relinquish or to give up their ways of living that are connected to their livelihoods, that are connected to their own sense of security, to live well and to live long, because of the monetary or profit-making requirements or needs of those who have more power than they do. And so I think that without taking that into consideration and without understanding that the decisions that are made at these tables have long-term consequences on the people on the communities, on the market woman. If she's not asked, how do you know?
Good question. Good question. Thanks so much for that. If you don't ask the market woman, how do you articulate her views in an international negotiation and claim that it's coming from them? That's a good question that we all need to answer before we go. Prof, before I move to the audience, in what Ms. Nyoni said, is the issue of the lack of accountability. Somebody goes to negotiate deals, purportedly for you, and yet your voice was not heard in there, and yet you cannot even hold that person accountable. How do we ensure that our leaders are held accountable when it comes to partnerships that they negotiate for us and on behalf of us? How do we ensure that our voices are heard? We hold them accountable to deals that do not speak to our needs when it comes to our own agenda. Prof.
All right, thank you very much. Before I answer the question, I just wanted to say one important thing about the principles. And it is that the principle of partnerships as partnerships. What do I mean by that? We need to understand when we say we're going to a partnership, that we ourselves should understand the word or the meaning of partnership. You can't say you want to be a partner with someone, but you are depending on that person 100% to provide funding, for example, for that partnership. That kind of mentality where we go and beg for money because we think that we are poor makes us junior partners from the very beginning, right? So when we go, we should be able to say we have 1, 2, 3, 4. You are bringing 6, 7, 8, 9. The partnership doesn't have to be equal, but it should be a partnership. So that is very important for us to have. So we change the mindset, and it's what I call decolonial partnership doctrine. We need to develop a decolonial partnership doctrine around this thing, starting with understanding what partnership means. And it has to be linked to an awareness of our self-esteem. If you want respect, you must respect yourself. You know, by going to your partners and saying, we have this, what can we get from you in terms of that? And from the very beginning, so we need to sort that out. There are other principles we can talk about, you know, regional agency and autonomy, for example, right? We can talk about transparency and accountability, as well as alignment with everything we do at the sub-regional level with the continental frameworks that already exist, so that there is coordination, proper coordination. But to your question, really, I refer to it as voicelessness, the problem of voicelessness, right? And my simple first answer, before we come to the regional level, is to first of all start at the national level, right? We need to rethink and repurpose our state systems. We need to repurpose them because these state systems that we inherited were never developmental from the very beginning. They were not created to be development platforms. States were created by the colonialists as exploitation platforms. And necessarily, they produce a corrupt governance. Because for you to be able to exploit, you have to be corrupt. All right? So you have to loot. You have to steal. And then you repatriate that loot to your home country, you the colonizer. And that's what informs why our politicians in Africa, you said we should be controversial, so don't blame me. Our politicians, the mentality of looting and repatriating the loot to Europe and America comes from there. All right? That was the original intention. So when we took those states over at independence, one thing we failed to do is to ask ourselves, do we want to continue in that essence, in that purpose of states that we inherited? If the answer is no, then we'll now talk about social contracts that will lead to accountable leadership. Once you have leadership at the state level that is accountable, that is responsible, then it becomes easy to translate it to the regional level, right? Because Ambassador Mustafa said in the morning that you know, a regional organization is as good as its members, right? If the members are weak, if they are corrupt, unaccountable, not serious, then it will translate to that level as well. So those are some of the things I would say that are important for us to do. And then maybe we can also talk about in specific things at the regional level. We can talk about regional civic councils, right? We need to have representatives of grassroots women, young youth networks, traders associations, labor unions, even students. You know, all of them need to be part of a platform. And we cannot have other public or popular forums, like Regional Economic Forum, West Africa Regional Economic Forum, right? Social and cultural forums where different peoples, different groups in societies meet on their own, deliberate, and then these forums should become part of the, you know, structures of ECOWAS, and then ECOWAS takes from them and embed them into eventual policies. Maybe I'll stop here and then hear from the crowd.
Right. No, thanks very much, Prof, and thanks to my panelists. Now let's do this. I've heard the principle of, people-driven interests. I've heard the issue of participation, literally, when we talk about voicelessness. Don't make decisions about me without me. But I want to then open the discussion to the audience. In one word, without explaining, one principle that you think should guide our engagement with partners. And I'd like to take it from three people, one from this side, one here, and one from this side. And I'll come back with the second question. On this side, yes, madam, one word. And I mean one word or phrase when it talks principles.
One word.
Yes, sir.
One word will be very difficult.
The professor has spoken.
Because the subject is so important.
Thank you.
Yeah. Comme vous avez demandé.
Since you have asked earlier, try my best. You've been giving me all kinds of directives. The time will go. Just allow me to talk. The African continent, and all historians have said it, has always been exposed. And it is also the geographical location of Africa that makes it to be like that. I wouldn't say so much on that. On the east, you have the Asians, the Arabs, the Iranians. All of them are there on the eastward side. The Atlantic is the slave trade. The Sahara has never been a barrier. So because of that, our continent has been a subject of attraction by others. That our diplomacy is quite low-key. Africa is not protected. We don't defend ourselves. The African citizen is not protected. The African citizen is not defended, I should say. We need to review our diplomacy, and that should be one of our major objectives of ECOWAS. How do we make sure that our diplomacy should be strong, whereby we defend the interests of our region? We don't need to have 36 heads of state who are in summits here and there, but we should have an organization that is capable to defend our continent and our sub-region within the multilateral system and within unity. Well, if the African Union is weak, ECOWAS is weak, that means that the African citizen will not be strong. We need to define multilateralism, and for this, ECOWAS should organize itself quickly so that it can really go ahead to defend both the citizen, our sub-region, and even the continent at large.
Prof, for making my one phrase to 2 minutes, but that is a very good contribution. Thanks so much for that. Yes, Prof. Then I'll come to you.
Thank you very much.
I'll make sure I give everybody the opportunity.
I'll not exceed 1 minute. First of all, you have to understand that...
I'm sorry. I had pointed to Prof behind you. I'll come to you, sir. I'll try to give you the opportunity. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair. My one word is autonomy. And autonomy comes with difficult challenges. I do not think as a continent, as a whole, we have really embarked on a journey for that autonomy as seriously as we once did when previous leaders achieved a consensus around the subject of independence. For instance, one of our distinguished panelists hit on something that is very disturbing to me. We are the ones who are perpetuating the architecture of both slavery and colonization without input from any former masters. We have boys' quarters. The intelligentsia built houses with boys' quarters, which is reminiscent of how no matter how old you are a 75-year-old man, you are a boy. We refer to our languages as vernacular, intimidated into accepting that in their meaning, these are the languages of slaves. We subordinate in the judiciary our own laws and norms to the so-called common law of some country or some other conquistador. India right now is beginning to systematically review her laws. Let me just take only one example, the issue of innocence of the law or ignorance of the law not serving as an excuse. From my study of African societies, it is to our people. It makes sense. It is empathic. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, there was a young man who was being killed, and he appealed to his father to forgive those who were killing him, his traducers, because according to him, they did not know what they were doing. In my town, that jurisprudential principle is upheld till today. Even if we say that ignorance of the law is no excuse, for example, we should also place it there that in Africa, in Ubuntu, demonstrable ignorance absolves. Unless and until we win ourselves, the baby that we grow must feel the pains of winning itself from free breast milk.
Thank you very much, Prof. A lot has been said, very loaded. It's just taking me back to the classroom, and I'm asking myself, wow. I'll come back to you, Prof, in a very private capacity to learn more from you. But thanks very much for that intervention. I want to come to this side of the house. I'll make sure everybody has an opportunity. In order that everybody is able to speak, I'll appeal that we keep our comments short and crisp so that everybody can have a say. Is that an agreement between us? Otherwise, once you go beyond a minute, I'll exercise my rights. Yes, Mr. Wan, I saw your hand up, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and I will be brief. I heard a lot about respect, building partnerships that are respectful of Africa's interest, Africa's dignity. And I tell you, a point was made yesterday by Chambers at the dinner. A point was made yesterday at the dinner by Chambers when he said that as Africans, including our countries, we need to respect our institutions. And he was referring to what happened to him while transiting through Lomé, and he was holding his ECOWAS diplomatic laissez-passer. And he made the point that if he had a UN laissez-passer, he would have probably gone through. And I know, because I held the UN laissez-passer for very long, it opens doors. Now, taking our institutions seriously, and that applies to ECOWAS and applies to AU, in the context of the partnership means what, in my view? It means our head of states have to attend the summits of their organizations. And I will explain why. Probably you may follow partnership with one country, Japan, China, US. Soon in Luanda, you will have a partnership meeting between the AU and the EU. All African head of states will be there. When it comes to their own summit, less than 20 or 25 attend the summit. And I've worked for the AU for over 2 decades. And when I say they attend, it means in actual fact, they are there at the opening. By midday, half of them have left. The last day when decisions are being adopted, apart from the chair, the president who has been elected as chair of the union, and the chairperson of the commission, you would hardly find an African head of state. The only African head of state I know of who attend AU summit from beginning to end is Thabo Mbeki, because he understood what it meant. So, respectful partnership start first and foremost by respecting our institutions and respecting ourselves. So if one recommendation was to come out of this meeting, and I'm concluding here, you, civil society, should keep a tally of African head of states who attend ECOWAS summit, and of West African head of states who attend ECOWAS summit, and West African head of states who go to Japan, go to New York, go to Paris, and don't attend ECOWAS meetings. Name them and shame them. Because even for them, out of self-respect, it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wan. Thank you so much. I mean, knowing where you have sat in the past, I mean, Chief of Staff, you surely know what is happening. I mean, and this includes the fact that, you know, apart from what Mr. Wan has mentioned, I don't know how an organization decides that these are my needs, and then in the budgetary allocations, the needs do not meet the budget, or the budget does not speak to the needs. For me, your budget is a declaration of your intent. So if you say education is where your energy should go, and you put less in education and more in travels and more in other things, it means that you probably did not get your priorities right. It means that you're not putting your money where your, how do they say it, where your mouth is. You see it? So we have ECOWAS Agenda 2050, AU 2063, prioritizing our needs. And yet every year when I look at the budget is not speaking to these agendas. And I'm asking myself, where did we sleep? How did we go wrong? And so, as a program officer, I'm transiting, yes, to the embassy. But as a program officer, every year, I'm forced to look for funding for things that heads of state said were priorities. So part of my job is to go and look for the funding and then what is then put in the budget is the heavy travel costs of officials. That for me is not how to run an institution like this if it's an institution about the people. And so it is something that we all need to think through. I saw a few hands up. I'm going to take all of you. Please make it crisp. Dr. Ajibewa, Prof, Auntie, I saw your hand. Please. I'll still have it, and then I'll come to this side. So let's take the last three from this end, and I'll come here, and then we'll go into the last bit.
I think earlier you were saying the key word, I have it here, strategic autonomy. The word, because ECOWAS needs to be able to have that capacity to make and implement collective decision in its own interests, socially, politically, economically, and in terms of military. One, I can say the own priority, what are they prioritizing, either development, trade, in terms of their relationship. Then they should also be able to mobilize internal resources itself. Then thirdly, they should also be able to engage partners, as rightly said here, on equal and reciprocal terms. Before I joined ECOWAS and Dr. Musa there, EU ordinary third secretary will come to say he wants to see Dr. Chambers. But when I came with my experience overseas with Dr. Musa, we said when a third secretary comes, third secretary must meet, even if it's at EU partners. Ask. From 205, we lay down. So it must be on equal partnership. Because at the end of the day, then you must also look for, it must be a reciprocal term. That's it, what we are now. Then finally, we must look for a regional actor. Another negotiation, it goes along with what we say. Some of our partners look for negotiating with individuals, like the EPA and the ECOWAS. And meanwhile, I don't want to go into the epistemology. Nigeria did not sign under Shegun Agagu. And people still accuse some of us, but we knew the reason. I said, how will I be with this Oyinbo for years? And you are bringing the EPA partnership. Some signed. They realized Nigeria didn't sign. You were there. They went to other countries. So you must look at them on equal partnership.
Thank you very much. Yes, Prof.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In terms of partnership, we know that there is a missing link, the issue of forecasting and looking forward. If you want to reposition ECOWAS by 2050, the demographic dynamic will change. There will have more old people, you have less young people. We need to look at what would happen at that time. The technological structure is bound to change to know Activia has more than 4 trillion now, which their GDP is bigger than Germany and France. Maybe we will not have ECOWAS because African integration will be so great that we will be talking only about Africa only. So maybe we need to take the issue of forecasting into account that we should bring into our current debate. In conclusion, what the Prof said about Pretoria, I don't seem to understand that. My center, which is an excellence center for leadership and excellence for Africa's development, carried out studies on the aspect of a leadership that is effective and efficient, that is broken down into management and is conceptualized, taking into account our culture, our history, our priorities, and our forecasting, and the data that we have at our disposal, and do the mapping, as he said, of the partnership. For me, partnership, in my view, is that something that is mutually beneficial, because the sustainability of partnership is that each of the partners should have their interests covered. So just for me to conclude by saying leadership should be a management to execute that. Let me give an example to illustrate that. We see that China is positioning itself. If you are interested, where they had that vision of being one of the first level power. It was in 1949 where Mao Zedong brought together, he brought the 100-day marathon. In 1949, they said they were going to overtake countries. If Africa wants to make progress, let's do a network of think tanks available on the continent that are focusing on the granularity of analysis that they require so that they can take decisions and to do forecasting of data and give a sociological understanding and historical and cultural areas of our community. Thank you.
What I hear is there should be more collaboration among the think tanks, but also to ensure that we don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, if one institution is doing something, perhaps we can assist that institution to do it better. That's what I heard. Dr. Diallo, I saw your hand up. The perspectives, okay. Thank you very much. Yes, Doctor, I saw your hand up.
Yes.
Can you capture it very short for me?
You're putting me on
Otherwise,
pressure.
you'll be denying others.
Okay. I'll be short. Thank you very much. Thanks for the excellent presentations. I work on mining, and I get really sometimes really confused and frustrated when I see African countries, and I would say West Africa as well, think of ourselves as we are coming to the table as poor. Because today, the majority of the world needs our minerals. So when you have what the world needs the most, how can you be poor? But I think the question is, who is negotiating? Who's sitting at the table? So we are not poor. And I don't want us to think that we are poor. We actually have what the world needs. And I think there is no time better than now for us to know, like, now we don't just have France and the former colonial powers. We have new actors. Everybody wants what we have. So how do we negotiate? And to end, I think it's about respecting ourselves. Today, Guinea has the Simandou projects, one of the largest mining projects in the world. Or minerals, the world will need Guinea's bauxite for the next 100 years. That's where everybody is going. But when you arrive in Conakry, you come to the immigration, you see people calling all the Chinese, the Australian, to go through quickly. And there is nowhere, I've been to China, to Australia, and all of these places, there is nowhere where Africans will be rushed.
Yeah.
So I think we have to. It's just to say that again about respecting ourselves, and we are not poor. We are at a strategic place where we have the most important things. So it's how do we negotiate?
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that. Now, Mr. Fianya, I saw your hand up. I did not miss that. If you could summarize in a minute.
Okay, just to add, because already a lot has been said, but ECOWAS is a supranational political institution, and I think the Prof has talked about the decision-making process within ECOWAS. There are two steps, of course: the administration of ECOWAS and then the political decision, which in itself overrides what could actually happen within ECOWAS. It has its own strategic plans and vision. Even if, in terms of its negotiation, if ECOWAS is allowed as a supranational organization, it could negotiate much more effectively, and there are practical examples to do that. And so I think it comes back again to what Prof talked about in terms of the accountability process within member states as well, and the obligations. And most of us don't even understand the bilateral cooperations that our member states or our countries sign. So it comes back to what I think Prof talked about, the need to look at how do we galvanize knowledge, information that enables us to hold our leaderships accountable. Because once we begin to do that, then it also helps them to shape their own mindset in terms of how they engage and sign cooperative agreements, which compromises their own position that impacts on a supranational objective as well. So I think that that is the collective thing that we need to look at.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
I just want to appreciate the first speaker for your balanced and your pragmatic approach on the basis of the realities on the ground. And I just want to align myself with your summation. And I want to disagree completely. And I'm sorry if I have a very pessimistic opinion or perspectives, because I heard my colleagues talking about strategic negotiation, West Africa negotiating with partners. What are you negotiating? From what position are you negotiating? Are you negotiating from a position of strength or a position of weakness? I think we need to understand the current realities of power politics in the context of zero-sum game that is going on in the global world. Look at the way Russia is deploying raw power against Ukraine, and the same thing Donald Trump is using tariffs even to protect the interests of the United States of America. Even West African countries are not spared. If I'm correct, Nigeria was placed on 15% tariffs. That shows that we are in an age of power politics, and it is zero-sum game. Winners take all. That is the reality on the ground. And it is important for West Africa to understand the context of the current realities and develop appropriate strategies. Unfortunately, West Africa is the most vulnerable, like the first speaker said, is the most vulnerable of all the regions in the world. People are talking about autonomy, autonomous agenda. Can we have an agenda where you have a dependent economy? Can you have an autonomous agenda where West Africa countries are the poorest in the world, the most indebted in the current world? What are you negotiating? I have a very pessimistic perspective. But for me, what is important is for West African countries to look inward and come up with a strategy that takes into consideration the peculiarities of the region, so that we can design a strategy to negotiate and deal with the Western global powers in the context of the current realities. Yeah.
I mentioned that I would want that to be controversial, and I like the fact that we can agree to disagree on some of these principles. But I'm told that my time is up, and so I want to come back to my panelists to give them a minute each to round up, and then we'll end the discussion. And I start with Ms. Nyoli.
Oh, sorry, I thought you would ask a question. So we've heard a lot. I think maybe I can end with opportunities that relate to in terms of the principles, right? About how we renegotiate. I think we are in a global moment where our partners from outside the continent, especially our Western partners, are facing an existential crisis, right? More people who look like me are in their midst, and they cannot ignore them. They are also facing an existential crisis because of the wars that have come right to their doorstep. And I think Ambassador Ajibewa spoke about, in the past how he would have a very junior EU somebody coming to his office, etc. So they still rely on us a great deal for the information we have, the knowledge we have. And I don't think that we as Penda is saying, I don't think we need to be in a position of deferring to them. I think there's much that we have in our arsenal that can help us express our agency and you make use of the resources that we have.
Okay. No, thanks very much. Prof, final words?
My final word, I don't want to engage in the ideological issues now because we'll not finish. So I'll just talk about a few key indicators that we can use to measure progress going forward. I think that's what policymakers like to hear. So some of the things we can use to measure whether we're making progress or not in the next 10 years will be percentages of major external contracts that have been publicly disclosed and subject to parliamentary review. In other words, we're measuring transparency. Then the share or percentage of contracts with enforceable local content and technology transfer, right? Number of projects with community consent, with social audits completed. As a way, to measure those things. Then, volume of pool procurement transactions and cost savings that's achieved. Those are some of the things that we can look for, to measure whether we're making progress or not.
Thanks so much, Prof. Final, 1 minute.
Well, you're not going to give me 1 minute. You've not been equitable in this giving the floor. I'm the only one that spoke only once, so it's not being equitable in terms of allowing me to speak. That's not just because I did not speak because of what you did. But in any case, since we don't have enough time, there were no questions, but rather comments. If ECOWAS was not existing, we would have invented it anyway. Secondly, there is a real problem with the legal country and the virtual one. I'm an historian, but I can say that after 50 years, we have history where I was waiting to have a vision of ECOWAS 2050 in order to be able to go against the pessimism of our brother here. We need to give the powers to the people. The African civil society should decide what we should do instead of giving that work to others, because that debate is there, it's ongoing. When I was coming to this workshop, Nigerian colleagues were saying, Sise, you know that in West Africa there are two powers, Nigeria and France. Well, saying that the Francophone countries are under France, and then Nigeria is on the other side. We're having an ideological debate that we are not going to enter into. But this is my last word, and I think that what we should do, we have a beautiful opportunity in 2025 to reimagine ECOWAS. But the main way of doing that is to have a critical mass of researchers to do forecasting to see how we are going to do that and bring the power back to the people, because they are the ones to decide the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 2 points. I will be very quick. The first one, again, I think it's not to be pessimistic, but we need to look at the reality as it is, and that's actually the only way to survive, which is the first objective that we should have as a region. And I think it's good that we know that we have a lot of resources. We might have oil, bauxites, like in Guinea, but if we don't have the technology, if we don't have the capacity to develop the project to exploit our resource, well, I'm not sure that it's changing anything in the reality of the people. So we have to recognize the gap that is huge, not just between us and the West or with China, but with most of the rest of the world, because we made a lot of progress in the last 3 or 4 decades that we did not make, and that has severe consequences on the way ahead. The second and final thing that I want to say, I was asked by the team of ILC to prepare a paper on this topic, and I asked ChatGPT to give an outline of what could be a foreign policy for ECOWAS. It's quite troubling. In just less than 1 minute, you have something which is quite interesting, defining key principles and how ECOWAS could build a foreign policy. And I think that should be one of the objectives in the next 10 years, to be able to have a proper foreign policy of the community, which should not replace the foreign policy of individual member states, but will be a coordinating mechanism so that we can have on strategic issues, a common voice of West Africa, and I think, again, I'm happy to share that. Thank you very much.
No, thanks very much, colleagues. On behalf of the panel, I want to say thanks to the audience, but also to panel members for your very insightful discussions. I mentioned that you could be controversial, and we've had very controversial ideas when it comes to partnership. In sum, what we are saying is that in the next 50 years, partnerships must work for us, be based on our interests, and we must participate in what is, that interest. You cannot speak for us without our voices. And therefore, I would want to urge us, I know that the conversation would go on beyond, this walls. Please let it continue. And thanks very much for your very wonderful interaction. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Where is our photographer?
Thank you.
The panelists should come forward for their photograph. And as they are coming forward, can we please all rise? Why are you surprised? I said you should rise. Please, everybody rise, eh? I used to do participatory workshop where people do exercise, but I know that you are all big men and women, so I will ask you to do big man and big woman exercise. Just stretch your hand off, stretch it by the side, push around,